Hey, this is Gary with Today for Tomorrow, and I've got a great video for you. I'm standing with Jen Reelitz from Food Forest DIY. We're in Jen's personal food forest, her own property. You might have seen a few videos we've done together. Jen's really good at this, and she's really enthusiastic and happy to share what she knows with other people. As a matter of fact, she's so enthusiastic about it, she just wrote a book called Food Forest Revolution. I've read the book. It's amazing. It's amazing because her true personality, I know her, you don't, but it really shines through in this book. And all her knowledge does too. Not only does it tell you how to plant a food forest, what to put in the food forest, where to plant it, but I think even more importantly, it tells you why to plant a food forest. So today, I'm so happy that Jen's going to take us around her food forest and show it and share it with you. Hey Jen, just really quickly, why did you write this book?
Yeah. I wrote this book for people who are brand new to the food forest journey. When I first started, I thought it was kind of overwhelming. There's a lot of information out there and you're not always sure kind of where to start. And so this is kind of your basic, like, where to start. If you don't know anything about food forest, I try to lay out all the reasons why a food forest makes sense, how to do it, what kind of crops to include, what grows well in Florida, and kind of your basic philosophy, design, and understanding of a food forest.
Yeah, I think you do an excellent job of that. It's short, sweet, to the point, and it makes you want to plant a food forest, and that's what this is all about.
Yeah.
So great, well, let's get out in your food forest. We're standing in a little patch here, but you've got it all around your property.
Sure.
We've got a beautiful winter day here. Because it's the winter time, a lot of these tropical plants are kind of not at their best looking.
They look a little sad.
They look a little sad, but they'll come back.
Yeah.
And either way, you're gonna get to see a lot of different plants. And you're gonna get to see the love that's going into this food forest. Let's check it out.
Yeah. So the first reason I think food forest is good for you is it's good for your body, your physical health. When you buy food in the grocery store, if you don't know the farmer who grew it or the folks who produced it, you really don't know whether that food is clean or not. What kind of pesticides and herbicides and other chemicals were used in producing the food. But when you grow it at home, you have the peace of mind that this food is clean. Food forest is also good for your physical health because of what you're doing to get your food forest growing. It takes a lot of exercise. Gardening is the equivalent calorie burn. 30 minutes of gardening is the equivalent calorie burn of 30 minutes of walking, yoga, Pilates, or other exercise. So because you're exercising and eating clean, food forest is good for your physical health. This is tree daisy. It's a cousin of Mexican sunflower, but it makes these beautiful white and yellow flowers that the bees absolutely love, and I love it too.
It's beautiful.
Yeah. Another reason that food forest is good for you is it's good for your mental health. We have a crisis in this country. The next generation is more anxious and depressed than any generation in human history. If there was ever a group of kids who need to get outside and get their hands dirty, it's this one. Soil has a mycobacterium that when it gets stuck under your fingernails, triggers the release of dopamine and serotonin, the happy hormones. Gardening and getting into food forest can help alleviate mild depression, anxiety, and ADHD. There are so many reasons, but food forest is good for your mental health.
So here we are in one of your several banana patches.
Yep.
And I think it's a really good segue into one of the main reasons I know you started doing food forest, and that is just to feed yourself. In what could be potentially uncertain times, we never know, so much craziness going on in the world. It's nice to know that you can actually feed yourself, and bananas can feed you. Let's talk a little bit about that, about bananas.
Sure. So yeah, food security. I think that's a big one. Just being able to be more self-sufficient so that you know that you can feed your family if you need to. Bananas are definitely a staple crop. So you can eat them green, you can eat them ripe. The other fruits that are similar would be the papaya and the jackfruit, right? You can eat it green like a vegetable, you can eat it ripe like a fruit. Bananas will keep feeding you if you feed them. I think food security matters because in 1945, 50% of Americans were growing food in their backyards, and they produced 50% of all the produce in the United States. So that generation had the knowledge and skills to be at least partially self-sufficient. Today, Americans grow less than 1% of our own food in our own yards, which means that we're entirely dependent on fragile supply chains, big corporations, and the government. For folks who have a yard, I think growing food just makes sense.
I think it does, and one beautiful thing about, there's lots we could say about bananas. We could and should do a whole video about bananas.
Yes.
But one of the things here in South Florida, one big challenge we have in food forests, any backyard gardens, is iguanas. And they eat everything they can, but they don't eat bananas. Iguana proof.
Hey.
Yeah.
So reason number 6 that food forest is good for you is it's good for your wallet. Inflation in the last 5 years, grocery prices are up 30%. Think about if other weird things happened. Next 5 years, if food prices increased 50% or 100%, food forest is a hedge against inflation. Whether there's a lot or none, you're definitely saving on groceries because you're growing your own food at home.
One part of a food forest that I think a lot of people overlook is ground cover. We want a ground cover so we're not dealing with weeds. Even though there's not really a weed in a food forest per se, I think people are inherently like neat freaks.
Sure.
And we want to just make things look orderly. But ground cover can be so good for the environment. It's such a crucial part of a food forest because particularly if you use natives, you're providing habitat for burrowing wasps, beetles, bees. We have like almost 300 species, I think, of bees in Florida.
Yeah.
And people just think about the European honeybee, which is not even a native. And most of these bees require some little place to burrow. We have, I think, 30 species that only live in Florida. Pollinators like the bees and the flies, all these little native flowers are so important for them. So not only can our ground cover control for tall weeds or unsightly weeds, it can really help our environment. So Jen, I want you to show us, you've got some beautiful ground cover. I know some of it's volunteer, but I also know some of it's intentional.
Yeah.
Talk us through your ground cover choices.
Sure.
And show them to us, please.
Yeah. So my 2 recommendations typically, if you're buying ground cover from a nursery, are Sunshine Mimosa with these pink powder puff flowers and Perennial Peanut. Both of those are nitrogen fixing, so they're helping the soil and they're great for pollinators. Besides the Sunshine Mimosa, in here we have this volunteer that's a native called Creeping Sage. And the creeping sage produces these lovely little blue flowers that the bees and butterflies love, and it's really thick. It does a great job of kind of taking over. And the food forest is just so good for the earth because of so many reasons. Carbon retention, water retention, building habitat. It literally helps heal the soil, and the soil is where the life comes from. One of the native flowers I love is porterweed. It's excellent for bees and butterflies, and the flowers actually taste like mushrooms. So they're edible, beautiful, easy to propagate. You can't go wrong with porterweed. So one of the reasons why I think food forest is so awesome is because it's low maintenance. We're using perennials instead of annuals, which you plant one time and they either produce forever, or like cranberry hibiscus, it's a self-seeding annual. So this cranberry hibiscus will live for 2 to 3 years, drop seeds, and when it dies, lots more will come. We had this really cool, weird thing happen where cranberry hibiscus usually produces red or pink flowers, but this plant hybridized, and now I'm getting cranberry hibiscus with yellow flowers, which is really cool. So if you are short on time and you don't want to be spending all your time out in the garden, food forest is the way to go. One of the reasons I love food forest is it's good for kids. It's good for both their education and formation. If you want kids to spend more time outside off their screens, food forest can be one of the solutions. If your children are running through the yard and there are bees and butterflies and birds making nests in trees and flowers and fruit. The yard's a lot more inviting than just grass and hedges. So kids have a lot of fun in the food forest. They're learning about insects, entomology, biology. They love to enjoy the fruits like star fruit, one of the favorites for children. So there's lots of reasons that food forest is great for kids.
And you know, speaking of starfruit, Jen, we were just talking about it. You grow starfruit, I grow starfruit. It's a favorite, it's easy to grow, fruits a few times a year, delicious. As you mentioned, this one is, look at all the flowers. Look at this one's really in bloom.
Yeah.
And it was heavily shaded, right?
Yes.
So maybe talk about the one in the front versus this one.
Yeah, I planted 2 starfruit trees at exactly the same time, exactly the same size. I put one out in a full sun location, which by the book is the right place to plant it. And I put one where it wound up being totally crowded and shaded by Mexican sunflower. The one that's in the full sun location, which again, like by the books, is the correct place to be, looks terrible. It's struggling, it's diseased, it's not flowering or fruiting. The one that got crowded out and shaded has been loaded. We just picked like 8 fruit off of this a month ago. So what's very cool is we're discovering that star fruit stays cleaner and can produce more in part shade, which is excellent because a lot of fruit trees really require full sun in order to flower and set fruit, but I'd say star fruit isn't one of those.
Absolutely. That's always a struggle when people think about a food forest. It's easy to think of some giant mother tree up top and then some other trees right underneath it and everything underneath it. But the reality is shade usually does not equal fruit. So the struggle always is those understory trees, whatever you want to call that next layer of trees. Looks like we found one.
Great candidate.
It's a good one. Okay, well, we've talked about a lot of really important reasons to plant a food forest. We hit on body, and we hit on mind, and we haven't yet touched on one of my favorites in your book, which is soul. And I know you're a spiritual person, and a lot of people have different explanations for what that means.
Sure.
But it doesn't really matter, because at the end of the day, there's that piece of us that needs that nourishing, and this is a great place to get it. I want you to expand on that a little bit, please.
Yeah.
Why that's part of your book, and what a food forest does for your soul.
Sure. I feel like, when we're out in nature, whether it's at like a state park or a beach, there's something about being in a forest setting where I feel like the divine can speak to us. I've had so many like spiritual epiphanies in the food forest where I feel like I'm really connecting and hearing God. And the food forest is just, I think, a symbol of his beauty and love. Like, look at how gorgeous creation is and how it all fits together, and the bees, and just, these are brilliant systems. There's no way in my mind that there isn't a divine designer. And I think the food forest is an amazing place to connect with him. In a time in history when people feel really disconnected, the world feels really mechanical and technology, and people can kind of get lost in virtual worlds. There's something about the real world that I think helps us connect with something deeper, something beyond what we can see. I always say I am not a physical being having a spiritual experience. I am a spiritual being having a physical experience. And I think that being in the food forest helps us reconnect with that part of ourselves.
I really love that. That's really well said. I think that's a great place for us to end on. I think that's probably, maybe not the main reason anybody plants a food forest, but it might be the most meaningful and impactful reason to have one. Jen, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your time. Thank you for sharing your knowledge. Thank you for that wonderful book. Please, if you haven't, already been exposed to this book, you can find it on Amazon.
Yep.
Check it out. If you're thinking about food forests, if you're riding the fence, I think that's really going to help you get excited about doing it. Yeah. So many wonderful reasons to plant a food forest. We just talked about a bunch of them. Go do it. Go plant a food forest. For now, I'm Gary with Today for Tomorrow, reminding you that it's the little things we do in our daily lives today, like plant food forests, to make all the difference in our tomorrows.